where people are saying, don't sleep on Brandin Cooks. He's the most underrated guy in the league. Eight people died inside this laundromat. They were murdered, and no one knows who did it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 14 of Player Normal Activity. I am your host, Kraig, and thank you for joining me once again here. My special guest this week is James. You've seen him on Twitter. You've seen him on YouTube before, but he is on Twitter at WhatMoney3000. He does baseball and fantasy football content, including offense and my favorite, the IDP parts of it. And you can find rankings, you can find projections, all that stuff over on his Twitter. James, thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Kraig. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to dive into the whole experience. So thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Glad to have you on. And we're always starting off the show here, getting into the football side of it. And the player you chose to talk about today was Brandin Cooks, wide receiver for the Houston Texans. A little bit of background. He's a first-round pick back in 2014 by the Saints out of Oregon State. He's going to be 29 this year in the Texans. He just signed a couple-year extension, which would seemingly keep him there for a little while through his age 30, 31 season, depending on what they do. It's sort of that easy get-out year at the end there. But he's been a solid fantasy wide receiver for most of his career, really. And we're not going to get into all the nitty-gritty, but what was interesting to you about Brandin Cooks that made you want to talk to me about him today?
The reason I brought him up is he's very forgettable, despite never having really done anything that's forgettable. And I feel like every offseason you see a bunch of tweets out there in the Twitter sphere or wherever you're going where people are saying, don't sleep on Brandin Cooks. He's the most underrated guy in the league. And that's been going on 5 years now. And I mean, all he does is get 1,000 yards. He's a first-round pick. He's played for multiple winning organizations outside of Houston, where he currently is. And I just don't understand why he doesn't get more love. And the only answer is really narrative. The narrative around him is bad and poor, and he's not wanted because he's gone to many different teams. And it just really doesn't make sense to me. And it's also kind of my overarching point, which is you don't want to fall into narratives, especially this time of year. There's always going to be camp hype because there's always people on both sides of the coin looking to make these rookies look good. You've got the front office who just drafted these guys and want to make sure, even if they do stink, it's unforeseen, it's unknown. How could this have happened? So in training camp, everyone looks their best. Likewise, you've got the beat reporters who want to get those scoops and they go and grab them and they put them out and then it's content for them. It's the same thing every season, and every season there's always narratives, and it's always just remember to take a step back and go, every single guy looks good right now. Outside of Leonard Fournette and his pictures where he needs to lose weight, no one looks bad. You have to think of it all relatively, and if everyone looks good, no one looks good, except for Brandin Cooks, who looks great.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who's just been consistent throughout his career, consistently good, just, never amazing, having the top 5 finish or something, but it also, unless he gets hurt, he's just not stinking up the bed for you. For the years that he's played at least 15 games, which is 6 out of 8, so he's been durable too, which is something that you want in a wide receiver. He's had at least 78 catches, 1,037 yards, and 5 touchdowns, which, I don't know, that sounds great to me if you can almost guarantee that out of a wide receiver in fantasy that's being taken nowhere near that tier, the top tier of wide receivers. Right now, depending on the site that you look at, his ADP is going to be all over the place. Somewhere it's around 20, someone's around 30, but about 25-ish is where I was looking. So that back end wide receiver too, man, it seems like that's almost his floor.
You chase stats in this game. You don't chase anything else. Brandin Cook just puts up stats. And for some reason, we try and find ways to discredit that he's going to do it in the future. And ultimately, it doesn't matter. We need him to do what he needs to do. We need to get him those wide receiver stats, and he does it. So who cares if, things don't look that great. Davis Mills isn't the greatest looking quarterback ever. Well, he's done it with plenty of different quarterbacks. Why are you expecting him to just suddenly decline drastically as opposed to declining, maybe slightly? He's just always underrated, and I just don't understand why.
Speaking of Davis Mills there, so he ended up playing a little bit of last year for him, and he actually didn't look too bad. I think it surprised a lot of people. A lot of people don't look at the college side of it too, realize that Davis Mills was a huge high school prospect going in, and it just really didn't work out in college in large part due to injuries there at Stanford. But do you see him as a guy that you think might take a step forward? That, not saying he's going to be a starting quarterback or anything in one QB leagues, or even a guy that you'd want to pick up off of waivers necessarily. But for fantasy purposes, for Brandin Cooks, do you think that he's going to be more mature and advanced enough that it could actually help him have that consistency at quarterback?
It's the year 2022, and I don't think your quarterback really necessarily has to be very good anymore in order for you to put up numbers. Certainly, it helps. I'm not saying that you don't want a good quarterback. You obviously do. But we've seen time and again great receivers, or even, above average receivers, put up great seasons despite not having a very good context. If you've got late in the game passing situations, yeah, sure, Davis Mills is going to throw your fair share of interceptions. Maybe he doesn't progress, but he's still going to be attempting passes. And that's really all that matters. It's often just overvalued. Oh, you want these people in these elite offenses. One, we don't really know who the elite offenses are going to be this year. Last year, we did not know that the Rams were going to be an unstoppable force, which they became from a fantasy perspective. We certainly don't know that Davis Mills absolutely stinks. And we certainly don't know that he can't just lock on to Brandin Cooks. Last year, whoever was throwing him the ball, even when it wasn't Davis Mills, things were going great. So it's just, again, I don't know, a bit tough for me to say, oh, you look at his circumstances, he can't produce. Nah, he still can definitely produce. Maybe he's not as highly likely as someone else, but it's just a poor narrative going on right now in Houston from a fantasy perspective, and it's just a lot of buying everywhere. I think Davis Mills is undersold as a guy who can be adequate. If you're in a super flex league, he's very much in play. Obviously, in the 12-team league, not so much. We're only starting one quarterback, but can he produce a good receiver? No questions.
Yeah, and you look what's around him. So Nico Collins is really the consistent player next to him, and he didn't play a ton of last year either. But when he was on the field, he did all right, and it's going to be his second year in the system. They're expecting a lot out of him. And to your point about Camp, one of those guys that everyone's saying is looking great. But outside of those two, even if we give him Nico Collins is going to be the other main wide receiver there. The depth wide receivers just aren't anything exciting. If you look back to last year, it was Randall Cobb, Andre Roberts, Isaiah Coulter, Chris Moore, Chris Conley. Jump ahead to this year. Okay, Chris Moore's still there too. Chris Conley's still there. Philip Dorsett. I think Chester Rogers just signed there. There isn't a ton of excitement really outside of Brandin Cooks. People are hopeful for Nico Collins, and he might be that nice wide receiver too for the team. But this is a team that is going to have to throw. If you look at their schedule, they got some teams that have improved. I think the Colts are going to be an even better offense. The Jaguars, I don't know how it could go backwards for them. So I'm just penciling them for a little bit of improvement. And then you look at some of the other teams that they play. They play the AFC West, which, every team out there is a team that's going to be able to put up points that they're going to have to keep up with in games, or at least try to. Whether or not they're able to, I don't think really matters because, again, to your point, they're going to be throwing the ball. Someone has to be catching it. And history tells us Brandin Cooks is going to be a big piece of that.
It's precisely that. Is Brandin Cooks going to be a guy who can jump up and be the number 3 overall receiver? No, he's not. But people like to be risk averse on guys who don't have that super high ceiling because they have delusions of grandeur where they're just going to hit on all these guys. They're just going to be a cakewalk over the competition, and there's nothing to even worry about because they're going to win every single week. Well, no one ever puts together that team. That's not how it ever falls. You need to have consistent players. You need to have anchors who do well, don't mess up, and make sure that you get some points when you got your guys with high variance don't do well. And that's the kind of guy like Brandin Cooks who needs to be on everyone's roster. And he just falls and falls because he's getting old, quote unquote, and he's on a bad team. And sure, he produced last year in the exact same situation, but not going to do it this year because we think we know better. There's nothing concrete here. There's absolutely no reason to not expect Cooks to put up what he did last year, which was 90 catches, 1,000 yards, 6 TDs. None of that is at all lofty and outperforming what he's capable of. If anything, it's on the conservative side.
Yeah, and he finished 20th in total points last year for wide receivers. It was like 18th, so about the same in points per game. To your point, the situation really hasn't changed as far as the team around him or what he is as a wide receiver. So it does feel weird to me that even when you're looking to redraft, he's going considerably later than that. If you can get a guy that's going to be getting even if there's a reduction of it, a 20% target share from that 25.6 that he had last year, that's a huge amount of targets. Clearly he produces with it. And I agree with you. I think people just end up not getting excited about players. They want to take players they feel good about and they're exciting and they're dreaming of that top 5 or top 10 even wide receiver year. And Cooks, they say, oh yeah, he's nice, but I'm going to go for someone more exciting. And I think that's a big trap people fall into in fantasy.
Yep, and everyone plays this game differently. So if you're looking for excitement, go ahead and draft those exciting players. But I think all of us really at the root of what we're doing is we're trying to win. And Brandin Cooks will help you win. It's very straightforward, and there's not really anything to discuss other than he's undervalued yet again. The narrative says, oh, he's not going to be good. The narrative is very clearly wrong in terms of probability. So just get him on your roster. I know it's not exciting. No one in your draft's going to go, oh, wow, you snaked Brandin Cooks for me. I wanted him so bad. That's not going to happen. But what is going to happen, he's going to win you games.
So just switching up to Dynasty for a little bit, the narrative that he's getting older, but he's still consistently produced throughout his career. If you're a team that's contending in Dynasty League, is he a guy that you're looking to try to get on the cheap maybe with that narrative that's going around him if you're looking to win in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah. Not only am I looking to get him cheap, I'm looking to overpay to get him today because the overpayment is still an underpay. So I'm gladly going to move a draft pick in my rookie draft if it hasn't happened yet. That is a little bit higher than what people might think. Maybe a high second, even a late first. People go, why would you do that? Well, I'm getting the guy that I wish I could get out of a late second or an early first this year. And if I'm trying to contend, I have the guy on my roster already. Sure, he's relatively old in a very loose term, being 29, but receivers produce into their early 30s plenty often. Brandin Cooks isn't exactly going to decrease his value. I see him like probably a lot of people see Emmanuel Sanders as a very good receiver who isn't sexy. And yeah, you want to go and acquire those guys on your team.
Sort of going through my teams here recently anyway, and then you brought up Brandin Cooks. I was looking through, and I had actually made a trade. Oh, this was back in May, right after the rookie draft. When sort of that rookie hype after the draft is a little bit higher even. But for 1-7 in a PPR Superflex league where I'm a team that just it's the third year of the league, and I just got into the playoffs the second year by design. I went super young, but I need another wide receiver on the team to complement what I have, which is pretty much Jamar Chase and Bateman. And I traded the 1-7 for Antonio Gibson and Brandin Cooks. And this is from a guy that's just trying to restart it, and he came to me with it. I'm like, deal, done. Neither one of them I think is going to be amazing this year, but in a deep league, these are like 50-man rosters, 12-team league. You want to have those depth pieces when you're contending, and having Brandin Cooks even as your wide receiver too, if he needs to be, I'm very comfortable with that this year.
Yeah, that's an excellent trade and the exact type of trade that you really want to make in Dynasty more often than not. Even if you're rebuilding and you've got this team where, oh, I'm going young, I'm not going to compete this year. Cooks is a great guy to have on your roster because he's more than likely going to produce, and there's going to be some sort of contending team that faces some sort of injury and needs to fill their flex heading into the playoffs. And you can sell him at that point for higher than you can sell him today. So acquire, accrue value, and sell. Of course, Cooks can get hurt. We all know that that's a possibility, but relative to the rest of football players, he's extremely likely to accrue value in season. So you want to acquire him now and then sell him off in the future, even on a rebuilding team. I have plenty of people who DM me, ask me advices on their teams, and I always give it to them. And often you see people on two extremes. You've got people who are either going forward right now, I got to go get my guys, I got to go win titles in my face, I can go grab it. And then you got people, I'm rebuilding, I'm not trying to compete this year, I need to get as much young assets as I can. And I say to both of them the same thing, which is slow the heck down. You're going too fast. It's August right now, it's July right now, it's June right now. No games are happening. In season, some unexpected stuff's going to happen. You're going to need to address a position, and you want to have assets you can move to go get them. You don't need to acquire all these guys now and have the perfect roster on day one, because the perfect roster on day one is not going to be the best roster come week 17. Likewise, if you're rebuilding, you can hold on to Stephon Diggs if you're not getting a good price right now. You can wait and wait and wait, and he's likely to stay good. And then you can sell him to someone who needs him. You don't have to sell heading into the season Because then what are you doing all season if you're rebuilding? You're not
Yeah.
doing anything. You've already acquired everything, and you've done it at not the greatest cost. Obviously, future picks right now are going to be the lowest they're going to be for quite some time. But future players, not so much. You can hold on to your elite guys and wait until a superstar in your league needs to go grab one. It's about patience, and a lot of people don't have necessary patience, especially in dynasty leagues, especially
Yeah.
when they're in them early. You want to gradually do things. You want to gradually acquire guys who are going to be good in all likelihood, so then you can sell them, or vice versa.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, and I agree. And I've been that way a lot in fantasy football and probably just in life of the impatience thing. But patience is a virtue for a reason, and being able to pick up those guys that are undervalued, like Brandin Cooks, and either you hold on to them or trade them off for someone that's more needy later on. It does usually pay off more than it's going to hurt you. So great advice there. We're going to move from the football field to the 40. But before we do that, I want to thank everyone who's watching and or listening to this, whether it's on YouTube at the premiere, after the fact, or your favorite podcatcher. Make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment. If you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button. We thank you, as always, for watching and being a part of this. And now we're going to go into our paranormal topic, and James is going to talk about Ohio University, where he had went for college, and some of the stuff that they had talked about and historically have been alleged to have happened there. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, when you think of Ohio University, people usually go, you forgot the word state. That's not necessarily the case here. It is an actual school. It is in the MAC. It's part of the Great Midwest. And it's where my alma mater is. And I went all 4 years from 2008 to 2012. And while they're Ohio State's babiest of brothers, they're also a very haunted campus. They have what used to be the Athens Lunatic Asylum, which is now part of the campus. When I was actually at the school, it was not part of the campus. It was just owned by the campus, but it was still a rundown area that was more or less used as a storage facility. And these are very old buildings. And when you think of Ohio, you don't necessarily think of old, creepy, New Englandy type areas. But the Athens Lunatic Asylum, which was known colloquially as the Ridges, definitely met that bill. You could sneak in after a few beers, which I definitely did twice, and it's a very fun time to roam around. You can go into the old lobotomy room, and while I say it's fun, it's also scary because you see the old lobotomy chair that was there and dusted off, and it's gross and cold and very, very creepy. And that's one of the main areas of the whole Athens Lunatic Asylum Coliseum. I think it's 4 different buildings. It was a lot. And nowadays they've renovated it. It's now, I think, even classrooms. But at the time, it was on the opposite side of the freeway. You'd go up on top of a relatively large hill. It overlooked the highway and it overlooked the campus, but it was relatively abandoned. It was only just offices that were in there, and they were few and far between. And it was definitely a scary time. I'm not sure how much scariness is still there, but it's not for the faint of heart to sneak in, hop over a barbed wire fence, rummage around where they used to do lobotomies, and there used to be insane people, and then run away, all while potentially having a few brewskis.
Yeah, and when just researching it, because I've heard of Ohio University from college football stuff mainly, but the oldest university in the state, 1804 for the university, and whether or not, I don't know the exact age of the asylum, but it's probably either that old or maybe even older, depending on when that sort of stuff happened. There's so many places like that where just, even if it's not paranormal stuff, just that feeling that you can get of negative energy because of what happened there for so long with so many people going through terrible things. I've never myself done that. Really, I don't have anywhere around here to do so. But that's crazy that the university has absorbed this and they're having classes and stuff there now.
Yeah, they renovated the buildings, and essentially they wanted to expand. They already had the infrastructure with these 1870s buildings that are still put together very well. And I'm sure it was a historical location. It was probably difficult to get rid of. And, there's also the tourism factor, which kind of is a thing. I'm sure the arts and sciences of the school were interested in keeping it around. So they did. And it's a very fun and interesting thing. I'm also a former New Yorker. And in New York, there are so many places and locations where, now it's a laundromat. But you look it up and, there used to be, a mafia killing that happened there. Eight people died inside this laundromat. They were murdered and no one knows who did it. And it's that exact same type of vibe where you go, I don't know exactly what could have happened here, but I know somewhere nearby, at the very least, something did happen, and you're always just aware.
Were there any stories that you heard from anyone in regards to seeing, feeling, anything like that? I know personal experiences don't always, you run across something no matter how many times you go through something. But had you heard anything about that from other people that have been there before you, during, or after?
Yeah, one of the two times I went in there, it was a group of about 6 or 7 of us. There was one guy who was the biggest skeptic, even a bigger skeptic than me, and I'm naturally just one of the biggest skeptics out there. And when he got down in the basement, he freaked out. He was like, I don't like this at all. I need to get out of here. This isn't good. We kind of needled him along to stay with us. And he had a very unpleasant time beyond just like, oh, it's kind of creepy. He freaked out. He ended up leaving and running back to his dorm.
No.
And he was like, guys, that was not cool. I did not like that at all. I was getting extremely bad energy from it. He never said, specifically what it was. I never really egged him on, but it was beyond just, oh, it's kind of creepy in here. It was something with him, and never really knew what, but I experienced that firsthand.
Yeah, and it looks like in the mid 1800s anyway is when it opened. So, not as old as the university, but you figure how long that place was open for. It looks like it was open for maybe 100 years or so. That's a lot of time with a lot of, bad energy, if that's what it was. And those lunatic asylums, there wasn't any shortage of, pain, torture, death at those places, whether it's recorded or not recorded. And I agree with you. It probably makes sense that it's hard to get rid of those places once they're around long enough, because the state historical societies usually get a hold of them. But every time that I hear about one of those places becoming, apartment buildings or, classrooms or something like that, I don't think I could handle being in like a night class there, or, going in to meet a professor after hours or something. There'd just be something about that. And maybe I'd just get up in my head about it, but that's crazy. I had not heard about that. That's a very interesting thing with that university.
Yeah, I definitely think the people who have no idea what used to happen in the room, they're kind of none the wiser. They might feel a little uneasy at random times, but they don't know why, and they just go, "Oh, felt a little uneasy right now." Okay, but the people who do know and research and pay attention to these type of things, yeah, I would find it very difficult, especially as a person who enjoys history myself, to go on that Wikipedia one day, scroll through it, understand what's there, and then go, "Oh, I have 3 of my classes in that building. I don't want to go there. I don't want to have that happen." So I completely understand that.
Anything else about the university itself, stories or claims or myths or anything like that? I know especially old universities tend to have stories, whether they're substantiated or not at this point. It's lost to history usually, but anything else about the university that you...
Essentially, it's just haunted by ghosts. It's your very standard old creepy asylum. Asylum ghosts are still around. Stay away. There's no specific, the ghost of Edward Tell or some crazy old name. It's just, a lot of people died there. A lot of people were probably buried on the grounds.
Yeah.
It's all nearby, and they're nearby too, because that's where they are.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I certainly learned something about Ohio University, and learned that I probably don't want to be going over that part of campus when I make it to Ohio someday. I'm guessing, they don't do tours and all that stuff anymore because it's university. But the other thing about universities is once you're on campus, you usually pretty much have free roam just to, wander around when it's open. So I'll make sure to stay away from that because I'm not looking to pick up on any of those vibes.
Yeah, it does overlook Peden Stadium, the great football location. So maybe that's why we haven't won a national championship. Who knows?
Could be. And I want to thank you, James, for coming on and talking about Brandin Cooks and the former Asylum, now part of Ohio University. Let everyone know again where they can find you and anything that you're up to or going to be starting up with the NFL season here.
Yeah, I'm over on Twitter at WhatMoney3000, as you can see my handle. I post rankings. I haven't been posting them very much this offseason, but with the season coming up here shortly, you're going to get them. I pretty much stay exclusively to Dynasty and redraft rankings, and they're always full season outlooks and full future outlook when it comes to Dynasty. So you're not going to get weekly rankings, but if you're trying to figure out what value is week 3, I'm the place to come look and find out, and also throughout the offseason. As I mentioned, I love getting DMs. I love, talking to people about their specific scenario because every team's different. And of course, I love my IDP. So if you're interested in any of those things, definitely chat me up, follow me, ask me questions, tell me, what my rankings, whatever it is, I'm there for it.
All righty. Well, again, make sure you go check them out and let them know if you have any questions about the rankings or any questions in season at all. And for us here at Player Normal Activity, remember that whether you're interested in Brandin Cooks or the Beast of Bray Road, we're going to have you covered here at Player Normal Activity. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you'd like more great fantasy football content like this, please click the link down below here.